Welcome to a football show, NFL Training Camp 2026 edition, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. That means football is almost here. That is Paul Kuharsky, paulkuharsky.com. I am Braden Gall. Good to see you, PK. There's going to be conversations and practice this week.
About damn time. So I don't like for it to happen, but when it happens, it's about damn time.
It always feels nice. NFL always opens before college opens, their training camps, and then the college season starts earlier, which I still don't understand how they get ready that quickly with like twice as many players. But here we are. Football season is upon us. It is approaching quickly, and we will be talking with Mike Borgonzi as well as Robert Saleh on Tuesday, and then we'll have practice on Wednesday to discuss on our later episode this week with Nick. So make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages. Linked in the show notes is the ticket link, Basement East, August 8th, coming up in a couple of weeks. Please come out and hang out with us. It's going to be a ton of fun on a Saturday night after Tomato Fest. It's going to be great. There's 3 different bands there. Tickets are only $15 in advance, so please come and hang out. There's going to be a bunch of 440 people there, a bunch of Sinkers people there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Always a great time to cool out after going to Tomato Fest. Slide on down a couple blocks to Basement East and hang out with all of us to celebrate Sinkers' second annual 40th birthday party. 5-time liquor store of the year, and just a tremendous selection of bourbons and tequilas and wine and champagne and an award-winning beer fridge where you can get East Nashville Beer Works, for example. All kinds of good local brews, so make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages. Linked in the show notes. Tickets August 8th, coming up in a couple of weekends. There we go. A little far for – sounds fun. A little far for you, Daniel. That is true. Go forth. Good to see you. As always, jump into the comment section. Please share the product. Today on the show, I want to ask you about, and I don't know how I missed this, like from a couple of weeks ago, but then it kind of picked up at the World Cup final, which is this very clear concerted effort by NFL Players Association to get their players to talk about grass. And I'm talking about the stuff that they play on, PK. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, because the Titans, of course, not only will they be one of the 15 teams in the league with turf this year, obviously, at Old Nissan, but once the new building opens, but they will also have an entire skylight of actual sunlight, natural light to get in there, unlike a lot of the other new stadiums. So I think there's a legitimate discussion to be had about what the Titans should do with that facility if they want their players to be healthy. So we'll talk about that coming up. Your article, paulkuharsky.com, the top 30 players of the Tennessee Titans training camp coming up. We're going to get into a debate about those players. What is most important? What is best? What is valuable? What does all of that mean in terms of the context of what training camp could hold as well? But we have some news right off the top here. JC Latham and Amani Hooker put on the PUP list late last week, made a couple of according roster adjustments. Any concern here from you with Latham or Hooker? Latham, we've discussed, incredibly important season for him as he enters year number 3.
Yeah, I was immediately told not a big deal, expected back shortly. You hear that sometimes, and then it turns out to be, 7-10 days. That acclimatization period is like 5 days. If Latham misses padded practices, which will start early next week, that'd be a concern. So we'll see. But the immediate level of panic was ridiculous and uncalled for. Got to wait and see. Now, if he misses, and I've written about this, we've talked about this, 16 padded practices are determining what goes on the offensive line. Now, he's the starting right tackle, unquestionably, but we've talked about what a hinge he is for things. Do we get the mature Latham? Do we get the immature Latham? Is he a penalty-prone guy? He said that was the number one thing he was going to work on. Well, it's a hard thing to work on your mental game while you're not playing mental games. But there are ways to deal with and address those things. So it'll be interesting to talk to him. This will forestall us talking to him. But, there's a chance that they take him off the list on Wednesday in time for that practice. So I have to wait and see. This, a lot of guys around the league start on PUP. Could have tweaked something or whatever.
Yeah. Real quickly explain the rules on that. Like, they have to put them on PUP when they arrive in town?
Well,
like what?
Yeah. So last week, a week in advance of veterans reporting, rookies and injured guys report. And so he and Hooker qualified as injured guys. And I think it means that they left as injured guys, probably, or they did something while they were away, which is usually what, you could slam a car door on your finger, or you can pull or tweak something. But the level of conclusions that people were drawing, I had a guy on Twitter telling me, he lost that weight, and now the way he's sleeping is affecting his head. These diagnoses are
Come on.
ridiculous. You just have to wait and find out what it is, and we'll see when we find out what it is, and we'll take it from there. He really did. He sent images of when you sleep on your stomach and you open up that hip. He thought that was yeah. Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, as an avid stomach sleeper, you're not supposed to do that in general, no matter how large you are or not large you are. Like, here's what I do know: the less I drink, even though Sinker's beverages, everybody, the more I work out, the better I sleep. Yeah. That's it. And the better I sleep, the better I am the next day. That's how it is. Now, I will say, at my age, PK, have you ever woken up having injured yourself while sleeping? When did that started for me around like 38, 39 years old. Well, I hurt an ankle.
Costanza hurting his calf trying to kick out of a hospital cornered hotel room bed. I've had, that. I've woken up with a calf cramp, which is just awful. But
I had an ankle.
I had an injury.
I had an ankle.
Stubbing the toe, getting in and out of familiar. That's always bad.
I just hope JC's doing okay, sleeping. I hope he's okay. I guess I can believe that the internet tried to diagnose his sleep patterns as the injury problem. I think that's absolutely hilarious. Anyway,
the big news out of Atlanta. This is a non sequitur, but I'm just thinking of it because somebody just responded to me on Twitter about this. There's an article out of Atlanta that said the headline was something like, after multiple bad years on special teams, the Falcons turned to Craig Aukerman. So I just retweeted with no comment. Yeah, there it is.
Bustin's on top of it. Bustin's got the notifications turned on. I do appreciate that. PK, I thoroughly enjoyed the tweet about the Falcons coaching staff earlier. Yeah, Daniel says it's difficult to imagine a less than healthy Latham lining up next to unknowns of Volson and Schlotman. Could be a rough side of the line as a whole. Again, we just don't know. I think that's a fair concern for Titans fans to have. But until they show up, until we talk to the coaching staff and the GMs tomorrow, and we actually kind of see what the plan is, there's no reason to jump to panic.
I'm told it's minor and he'll be back soon. So how do we have him not starting on opening day? Or have him holding some kind of lingering injury on opening day? Why do we want to do that? Like, I understand he's a concern, but and maybe there's a week or 10 days, and that sucks. But it doesn't have an impact on him opening day.
Yeah. Go forth. Is that Thierry Henry in your? I think that is. LOL. They lost last year. Special teams was disastrous. Buckle up. Okay. All right. I want to get into first before we get into the rankings. I do want to discuss sort of what you expect to hear tomorrow. You've been to a lot of training camp opening press conferences. This is the first for Robert Saleh here. It's the first for Borgonzi and Saleh together. It's the first for Robert Saleh with Cam Ward. Like, a lot of firsts for this organization, even though Borgonzi's been here. What do we expect to hear? Anything specific? Is it a new message? Is it new strategy? What do we expect to hear on Tuesday as the two of them take the stand?
I think it'll mostly be nothing. Updates, expectations couched. I think the big challenge tomorrow is how do they be optimistic without being overly optimistic and setting them up for failures. I think Joe Dubin will probably puff out his chest and come and ask if they're a Super Bowl team, to see how they dance about that, and then get a week of content for his show. Doing this, boy, God, witness.
Good way to do it.
Tough question. Some logistical stuff about how the ramp up process works, some logistical stuff about the injured guys and PUP and all of that. Maybe some, who are the biggest questions coming in? Levis. We're going to want to know about Levis. They're going to have to put Levis out there relatively soon, but not too soon.
Right.
And these questions that we're talking about, what do they foresee for Latham once this injury is ready? What's Cam done for the last 6 weeks? I haven't sat down and made my list yet, but I need to just dive directly into some things that I'll be watching for in the first week. Not going to be a lot of run game answers until the pads go on. Not going to be a lot of offensive line hints until the pads go on. So those stories are gonna have to wait a week.
I think one of the things I do think we could probably learn throughout the course of camp, it's going to take time, and I don't know what the right, to your point, I haven't really thought through what the right question is. Maybe the question is, what are reasonable, how would you describe reasonable expectation for first and second year defensive players? That's what I want to know. I want to know Kevin Winston, Marcus Harris, Keldrick Falk, Anthony Hill, and I might even put, I don't think Cedric Gray, he's obviously not a second year player, but he's kind of a second year player because he didn't play it all his first year. So I'm curious what they feel like those camps should look like for that group of players. They all have pretty critical roles. Femi Oladejo's in that group. So I think when you look at those 5 or 6 guys in the last 2 draft classes that Borgonzi drafted, I think having kind of setting a bar of like how a coach or GM would describe the expectation. I'm not saying, I expect Marcus Harris to start 86% of the snap. Like, that's not what they're going to say. But like, what do you want to see? And is it, and then what do we take from that? Which is Anthony Hill's rotating as the top 3 inside linebacker, right? Like, that could be it. Keldrick Falk could be starting. He could be first in line. Now we can't discuss all the nuances of packages and that kind of stuff, but I would like to know what they define as a successful set of expectations for that group of defensive players.
I would say, that's a big mix. Out of that, you want more than not to be steady contributors. And I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation. Good teams that emerge have young cores and get big contributions. Marcus Harris played pretty well last year. He's thrust into a role they didn't expect, 6th round pick, right? Jackson Slater, I've written about and we've talked about, is a test case of that small school, sit a year, develop, contend for a role. If he wins that role, I think a part of them would much rather have Jackson Slater win that spot than Cordell Volson. Jackson Slater's under contract for a couple more years after this one. He's their guy, brought up in their system. Volson's more a stopgap kind of guy, right? And if Volson wins that spot, you still want Slater ultimately to win it, or you're looking for a guy in the draft that ultimately is going to be your right guard. Those young guys, Winston, high draft pick, first, second, third round draft pick, you need to be a starter. And I think they benefit from the fan base giving the benefit of the doubt to their young drafted players being on a learning curve. I mean, you see anything good from Winston and people are like, man, I think even media wise, there's some people who've declared like Winston to be like a top 3 defender on this team based on what they've seen already, which I'm sorry. I know people find me the pessimist. He was a nickel safety, and he did relatively well as a nickel safety, but we haven't seen him play safety, and we haven't seen him turn and run, and they need a turn and run safety very badly because Amani Hooker, even if you're giving him the benefit of the doubt that last year was a overextended safety who's lost a step, but can cover up some of that stuff. We saw Byard have a season like that, and he bounced back, and he's bounced back in the league. But even if that's what happened to Hooker, Winston needs to be better than him at turning and running and being the last man back. And we haven't seen him in that role yet. So I'm not proclaiming Winston anything until I see him play that role.
Well, and look, I'm captain of the Kevin Winston fan club here. Relative to the rest of the Titans press corps, I think I was higher on him when they drafted him, higher on them last year, higher on him now. I still can acknowledge that in passing situations, the guy did look occasionally lost when it comes to complicated coverage schemes and complicated route combinations. He's a rookie. He didn't play a lot. He's going to have to make a lot of progress. And I say that as someone who thinks very highly of him and I think he's going to develop quickly. Somebody asked here, Gavis asks, PK, any thoughts on the youngsters Coogan and Carmona, as well as Janik for special teams? I looked this up, PK. Dan Moore, just as a starting offensive lineman, I didn't know what their sort of their actual strategy is for offensive linemen on special teams. He had 24 special team snaps, played a bunch of them in the first 6 weeks last year, then didn't play a single snap like the last 12 weeks of the season on special teams. So I don't know. Do they normally have an entirely new set of 5 along the offensive line for special teams? I don't even.
Well,
like
you'd have to have 10 up to do that. So I don't think it's 10. I mean, I think Schlotman would probably stay.
Yeah.
It certainly in situations where the ball's being. The center's changing for snapping, so that's one.
Cox is in there. There you go. Zeitler had 55 special team snaps. Got snaps in every game last year, but he was in the 18 to 20 range.
Yeah, so I think those guys are on one unit probably.
Okay.
I don't know which one it is, and they may all take turns. Like I'm on this one, you're on that one.
Yeah.
But the 6th, 7th, 8th offensive linemen are playing on special teams.
Yeah.
Maybe 9th, but there aren't 10, so there's no way to roll it all over. Morgan Cox qualifies as one.
So that could be your 10th, right? I mean, if the other 4 are the same.
Right.
So I assume the center's not, Volson and Slater strike me as guys that will be getting a ton of snaps on special teams.
Think so. Or you could say, I don't want to overwhelm this kid, and special teams too much for him. And I would think Skoronski's probably not playing those spots, but maybe Latham has to. I don't know.
One more question here. With the money we spent on the secondary, any chance, this is also from Gavis, that Saleh goes to 3 linebackers and puts the cornerbacks in man-to-man role? My quick answer to that is not really. No. He doesn't really play a lot of man coverage. He does a lot of 4. He does a lot of quarters coverage, honestly. More, I think, than anybody else in the league last year for San Francisco. There are situations where you could have 3 linebackers on the field, in whether it's short yardage or goal line or whatever. But I doubt on a 1st and 10 that they're going to have 2 corners and 3 middle linebackers on the field.
No, their base is nickel. They'll have 3 cornerbacks on the field, high 70% of the time. And after that, they'll probably play more dime still than well, I don't know if more dime than base, but they'll play a lot of dime too. They will not be in a base with 3 linebackers on the field very often.
How many teams run a 4-3?
That leads to one of the big questions about that linebacker position, where Cody Barton's the incumbent, but Anthony Hill should, I think, in relative short order, qualify as a better player. So then it comes down to comfortability, comfort level. Some of it keys on Cedric Gray's ability to communicate. So Anthony Hill is rooting like hell, whether he knows it or not, for Cedric Gray to be a prime communicator, unless Anthony Hill's that great of a communicator, so that Cody Barton doesn't need to be on the field for the communication stuff where he's not as good a player.
Yeah. Andrew says, I'm just excited for the new uniforms and going 7-10. I think that's about where people should be. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I think that's about where you should be. Team Ramrod says, do we talk about Sweat and the Jets NFLI list just yet? I have not paid attention to the
non-football injuries. So PUP is a football related thing. I kind of misspoke earlier. So if you do pull a hamstring while you're away from the team, that is a non-football injury.
Even if you were training, like if you were running,
it's off property pretty much. Okay. So Hooker and Latham have something that's a holdover from
minicamp.
Yeah. So they had something when they left.
Could the defense rely on Hooker to be the green dot?
They could. The green dot thing's way overrated. Bullock has said so. The green dot needs to be able to repeat words that are spoken into his helmet. Now, the question is, when that's cut off with 15 seconds left, I think it is, what do you do after that? That's where Barton is very good. Yep. And teams, offenses are waiting to set things in motion until that's cut off. So that you can't have Saleh and Bradley and whatever other coaches in your ear giving you adjustments from there. That's where Barton is making his pitch to stay on the field.
I've not studied this, but now I want to go back and watch a San Francisco game. But I would love to know the number of formation switches that Kyle Shanahan produces with 15 seconds or fewer or less on the clock. I bet you there's a vast majority of his hey, we got a tight end over here and an H-back here and 2 receivers here. We're going to switch to 2 tight ends and the H-back out wide. I guarantee you that pre-snap motion happens
Starts
around 15 seconds. Yeah, but I'd love to see it, though. I'd like to go back and actually look at it. Okay, let's dive into this. Your list of 30 players, paulkuharsky.com. We're not going to read the whole list. Please go subscribe. That's what we're here for. Please go subscribe. But we're going to debate how important these players are, how valuable they are, what they need to see, what we need to do. And so I want your list is yours, and I want you to tell us how you define the criteria and how you made the list. We don't really need to talk about number 1 or 2. Again, go subscribe if you want to find that out. And we're not going to talk about every player, but I want you to decide and describe your criteria for this and how you ranked them relative to sort of the, it's not just best 30 players on the roster, right?
No, not at all. What I tried to do, and I'm realizing the graphics all screwed up. What I tried to do is not rank the 30 best players or weight it towards the most important positions. Contextual look at how the roster's built, where the biggest variables are, and who needs to play well for the team to have the best chance of success. And so the 3 that are out there, obviously Ward and Simmons are obvious, number 1 and number 2, but I think you can argue a lot about number 3. And for me, number 3 is a guy that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the last 3 shows that we've done together, J.C. Latham. They need J.C. Latham to be good and solid and dependable at right tackle, not a variable, if they have any chance of being good up front and I think overall. And so he, to me, is maybe the 3rd most important guy.
I really debated that because I think there's a lot of names you could put in there. I think Latham is – I think the 2 names that I debated are Latham and Carnell Tate. And I think Tate, they're not asking a lot of him because there are depth pieces in the receiving core. And Latham at right tackle is not being asked to be the savior or even the best player on the offensive line. But those are 2 pieces that will help Cam Ward enormously if they are as good as they can be, if they realize their potential. And so I think if you're telling me you can pick 2 pieces on this team that at the end of camp they say we're confident, we're ready to go, they're going to be big time contributors, the team's excited, the media is excited, the fans are excited, and the players are excited, meaning it's going to be good. I think Latham and Tate are the 2 you circle in a pretty big way as who could do the most to support Cam Ward quickly, and I think it's those 2.
And I get to Tate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly.
Was there anybody else that you debated, or is, again, without giving out the list, I'm just, was there anybody else?
No, but because of the way I've been contemplating him, I mean, I think John Franklin Myers is the next best player. I think John Franklin Myers is probably right now the 3rd. If I was ranking quality of players, I think he might be the 2nd best player on the team. Yeah. So, he's got some consideration there. And I think Tate is wildly important. I think on this list, I'm also looking at some roles that are filled. So like Cordell Flott, I probably have higher than a lot of people would, but I think they see him as a guy who can consistently hold up one side of the field or maybe the best receiver. And you've got to have one of those guys in order for the expanded pass rush to matter.
I will say that on veteran players that are more established, whether they've been here a while or not, I devalued them to some degree. And I would put Wan'Dale Robinson in that category. This is not about who's good or who's bad, and it's not about being important. It's about, I think I know more about you. So John Franklin Myers, for me, I moved down my list. Wan'Dale Robinson, I moved down my list a little bit. Tony Pollard, for example, is not even in like my top 20. And it's not to say that he's not important. It's not to say that he's not.
Pollard super, super low on my initial version.
I have mine even lower.
and I talked myself into moving him to a little bit more reasonable of a thing. I mean, the guy is one of 2 backs in the league with 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and he might get there again. But I will say 1,000-yard seasons don't mean that much, and 1,000-yard seasons really don't mean that much. I don't want to diminish. If he has 5 in a row, that's a very impressive feat. But if they come 3 yards at a time, that's an issue. It's going to look a lot different than Derrick Henry's 5th 1,000-yard season in a row, right?
I have Spears ahead of Pollard in terms of importance, but not because I think he's better or because he's going to get more snaps.
Right.
It's because I think if he delivers on, let's just say, whoever the most optimistic is on Spears, which between us is me.
I think between a lot of people, it's you.
That's fair. That's fair. But if he gets to 105 carries and 55 or if he gets 150 touches and has 600 or 700 yards from scrimmage, I think what you're doing is you're saving Tony Pollard. You're giving him a little bit of weaponry on third downs to catch passes. You're probably converting on a few of those third downs, and you are saving. You don't have to drive Tony Pollard into the ground by the early or middle parts of the season. I think having a really healthy 1B or 2A running back who is productive and dependable, I think he is a more important piece than Tony Pollard, even though I know what I'm saying when I'm saying Tony Pollard is your starting running back. He's the guy who's going to get more carries. I just am not worried about him. What goes along with that yards per carry thing you're talking about, PK, is dependability. And while 3.8 or 3.9 may not sound sexy, and it may not break off long runs that flip the field or pick up first downs, I can almost guarantee you that he's going to get to 3.9 yards a carry or 3.8 yards a carry. So I'm just not worried about him hitting those marks. Now, is this the year that it falls off the table and he's just washed? I guess that's possible, in which case Spears is even more important then. So I just think Spears is the more important piece for the Titans because I don't know what he's going to give them versus I know what Pollard's going to provide.
Yeah. You and Spears and first and second down. That's an interesting concept. I mean, Gavis is going a little overboard here with Singleton taking over midway. I think that's way too optimistic.
Taking over for Pollard? Is that what you're saying, Gavis? Just clarify that for us.
I think that's too much as well. But I think if Pollard is down, I think first and second down are a big problem. And I would look to Singleton over Spears.
Really? Oh, you are down on Spears. Okay. All right. So
I mean, even if you went to Spears there, what would you get? A game and a half out of him before he's hurt?
I cannot come back with anything with your smartassery there. I can't say anything back to you.
It's missed.
But it doesn't provide
games in the last 2 years.
But it doesn't provide like four-ish games a year is what he's missed. And that's going to happen. So we'll see. If it doesn't happen, then I think that's what makes him more important. But we'll see. That is probably the gist of my argument, is that if he plays 15 to 17 games and gets the carries he got in his first season, he was very productive and does break tackles and is a physical runner and can catch passes. And I think Brian Daboll wants to use him a lot this year. That's my theory. So for example, you've already talked about Cordell Flott. I would put Winston, Flott, and Taylor kind of together in a group, and I think they might all be top 10 players in terms of how important they are, mostly because I don't trust what's behind them. And they're because they've invested a lot in Taylor and Flott in terms of dollars, and they are Winston's expectations are high because you drafted him in the 3rd round, and he, by all accounts, appears to be your starting safety. So I don't know if I have them top 5. I don't think they're that valuable or important or whatever. But if those 3 stay healthy and actually can play their positions all year, I think they are as important as anybody else on the team.
It's hard now, right? You're talking about that rebuilt secondary. You got 3 really important guys, and you got to. I mean, it always pairs with the front, right? And so Simmons and Franklin Myers and Falk, who I give the best chance to be the best edge guy, because Jermaine Johnson's a great run guy, but he doesn't get to the quarterback with any regularity. And I probably have Jacob Martin higher on this list than a lot of people would, because I think he's the most different. And Drew Beatty did a good piece last week looking at all the edge guys and reminding us there's not a speed guy on there, but that Jacob Martin is the most different. And he played about 60% of the snaps for Washington last year and had 5.5 sacks. That's nothing to party over, but I do think he brings a little bit of promise here with a really good defensive head coach and a really good defensive line coach. And so we'll see about that, but still a hole. Like we've gotten caught up a lot in the. It's funny how the cycle goes, right? You really talk about the holes they have, and then you really talk about everything they did to patch, and now we get back. I think finally, and maybe a lot of people don't until the regular season starts too. Oh yeah, but they really didn't get X or Y. To me, that's speed rusher for sure is still a hole here. Secondary depth, as soon as somebody turns an ankle, or we saw during minicamp and OTAs with those corners out, not a lot behind them.
This might be a good time to ask this because I think Nick Suss is of the belief that they will bring in a veteran corner during this period of time. If you told me they were bringing in 2 or 3 players that are veteran, not like undrafted free agents that are trying to make the team, but like guys who actually could make a roster spot, are you with him on that? It's corner. Is there any other position you think they could go after?
Kenny Moore, I don't think has signed. Kenny Moore's got to wind up with a better job than Titans, backup nickel / third outside guy. I think he would jump the guy from Kansas City, but boy, would he be a prospect. I think corner for sure. And offensive line is kind of like break glass in case of emergency, which is certainly
possible.
So,
does the third string quarterback get traded or released before? So this is a question because you have
fascinating storyline. Like if you're not fascinated with the second string quarterback, which people usually are, you're fascinated with the third string quarterback.
Well, so here's what I would say. I would not have Levis in my top 20. You do not have Levis in your top 30, but you have 2 quarterbacks in there. And I think that's fair because they are more important. But if you're asking me of the most interesting and important storylines, not players, but storylines in the camp, I wouldn't have Levis top 5 or 10, but I'd have him close. And I just think he is a really interesting. And I think to your point, it is not the proper ratio of interest to value Levis but it's going to get a ton of attention, whether he's traded or not.
He is, though, right? He was a little better through the spring. He had some days that were good, but he still had some moments that were old Levis. I think Daboll will be good for him and maybe clean him up a bit. Does that show up in a way that really makes him more valuable than he's been already, with people knowing what they know about him? I guess it depends on the extent of the injury you suffer at quarterback or how shitty your competition for number 2 is where you are. But he's not burning a hole in their pocket. Whatever happens probably happens later than sooner. And it's completely possible they don't get anything for him, or that they get something for him right at cut downs where somebody says, hey, we'll swap sixths with you because we don't want to take our chance on waivers. Did Malik set the bar for him? What'd they get from Malik? A swap of sevenths, something like that?
Is that all it was?
I don't know. It wasn't very much.
Here, give me a second. I'll look it up.
So how much of it was Callahan's fault? All of that. I mean, at a certain point, a guy's resume is a guy's resume. A lot of quarterbacks who haven't panned out didn't pan out in bad situations. The quarterbacks who don't pan out generally aren't in great situations.
I didn't think it was a swap. It was a straight up 7th round pick, which ended up being 239th overall for the Packers.
I mean, I don't think when Borgonzi's making calls on Levis, he is in position to demand anything. The other teams are in position to set the value.
Here's an interesting one from A. Fiji. Can we please cut Levis so we stop hearing about this very bad football player? Holy smokes. Look, he's got value because he plays the quarterback position. And his skill set is, here's the thing that if you don't, and you can probably back this up, if you haven't talked to a lot of coaches in your life, which you and I have had the pleasure of doing, you learn something very quickly in this business, that every single coach thinks that they have the answer to every question. And so when you see Will Levis and you see the transformer skill set and body and arm, the pedigree of where he's drafted, and the fact that he's still so young, what you want is to sell to every other of the 31 coaches that they can fix him. And if there's somebody that has that kind of value, it's hard to just cut them. It just is.
I know, but also you're saying, hey, you're saying I could fix him. Well, why wouldn't you fix him and make him better than Trubisky?
New coach, new staff.
And I had an interview with him at the combine, and I wasn't that impressed with him. So I don't want to fix him. He might have some tools, but he didn't have the head that I want. And I don't think Malik had such a Joe saying Levis has to have a great preseason like Malik did. Malik didn't draw a 7th round pick because he had some great preseason. Malik drew a 7th round pick because Matt LaFleur and Green Bay were willing to take a flyer on a guy.
He had a ton of
give up a 7th round pick.
It's not. I will say it's not that different than Levis. It is a little different, but this is a guy with extremely high level athletic ability, with a big arm and a good attitude, and had enough talent to be a top 100 pick. And those are the kinds of players that other coaches like to take flyers on. And that was Willis. We all saw Willis's ability. He just needed to be put in the right system. And that system, when LaFleur uses him, when Love got hurt, was not asking him to do a whole lot. And it was asking him to use his athletic ability. It was asking him to run a play action bootleg offense. And that's where he found some success.
Which, by the way, isn't too far off. I don't know about the bootleg element necessarily. But Vrabel and his people certainly dumbed things down for Malik when they had to go to him here. And he just wasn't as ready for it as he was when he got to Green Bay. And he wasn't surrounded by the same kind of talent and all of that.
Yeah. So I think there's value there, and I agree that it's outsized. The interest in Will Levis is outsized as compared to his value to the franchise, both on the roster and off of the roster. Here's the question I was going to ask you about these rankings, though, because I want to know of the defensive backs, and if I'm going to go Winston, Flott, Taylor, and Harris, I think those are the 4 most important. I think Hooker is what he is. I think he's a dependable piece. I think the backups kind of are what they are. Tony Adams is a guy that could be of value, but I think we know that he's just, the expectation is being a third safety potentially. So I think it's the 2 starting corners, Taylor and Flott. It's Winston because he's a bit of an unknown to some degree, but has a ton of upside. And then Harris, who might be asking to play a role that he might not be ready for or qualified for, but we all think that he could be good. Of those 4, how would you organize those 4 in terms of importance?
Well, I have Flott number 1. I think Flott, Taylor's attribute still, until he proves otherwise, is that he's been a versatile guy. And while he's going to be, almost strictly an outside guy here, the versatility still makes it like his coverage abilities make it that he can be effective covering some of the inside stuff that his outside receiver might do. Right. I think Flott, he's small, like lean, like thin.
Yeah.
But we've seen guys like Samari Roll was no bulldozer. Different time, but so we'll see what Flott can do in terms of run support, which is an important piece of that. We'll see how he does it staying healthy, because it looks like a breakable guy, but that hasn't been an issue for him. But I think, like I said, you want a guy that can take care of one side of the field or one receiver for you to pair with that pass rush. And to me, he's more the candidate to be that guy than Taylor, who has some unattractive metrics that he brings with him from the Saints. He gave up touchdowns. He gave up, I think, passer rating. Not that he doesn't have upside, and not that there's not reason to like him and all of that. At Winston, they need a center fielder guy. I was talking about this earlier, and speed. So I'm really looking. Yeah. Now people got very excited that he was a hitter in minicamp and OTAs and over aggressive. Oh, I like that. And I'd rather say, whoa, after the fact than giddy up and all of that stuff. That's great. I don't care about that. I don't care so much about safeties coming forward. I don't think you have a problem finding safeties that can come forward in the box. All these guys they have on the roster, Kane and these other guys, Brooks, they don't have trouble coming forward, right? You can find Titans have been patching in safeties during injuries that could come forward. The problem is going backward. And so he's got to be good at going backwards. So don't ooh and ah over him coming forward and delivering a big hit or knocking a ball away after a guy with his back to him makes a catch. It might be a good highlight reel moment, but what's he doing on the deep post? That's where I need to see him be a difference maker. And I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying we haven't seen him in that situation really much at practice. And, the difference between that at practice and in a preseason game and in a regular season game those are big steps up the ladder.
So I would have Winston at the top of that list for me, just because I think his upside is bigger, and because you drafted him and he's younger, you need more out of him in general. So I would put Winston there.
Here's why I didn't. Receiver league.
No, you're right.
And you got to stop prime receivers.
You're right. I mean, what corners get paid more, period. They get drafted higher, period. They are of more value. There's no question. I would have Winston and Flott both in the top 10 in terms of most important players on this roster. I would have a break, I think, in the secondary. I think I would have Taylor and Harris kind of down a few more slots from these guys. I think these two are above everybody else. I would then mix in a bunch of a couple of pass rushers. I think Keldrick Falk and Jermaine Johnson are the two names that I would have in the top 10, because you're not asking them to do things that they're not supposed to do, but you are asking them to hold down the positions for a while. They both have first-round draft pick pedigree, and one of them is going to be shooting for a contract this year. So while I like Martin, to your point, as sort of the change of pace guy, I think Femi is an incredibly important piece in terms of evaluating Borgonzi and all this other stuff, but like they're not counting on him to be a 10-sack starting player right now. Like they're just not. And so I think if you look at the starting lineup and you go Jermaine Johnson, Keldrick Falk on either side of John Franklin Myers and Simmons, who are totally dependable and we kind of know what they are, I would have, I think Keldrick Falk probably like 8 on my list. I might have Jermaine Johnson at 9, but I think I'd have him in the top 10 because I think what they are, can they be versatile? Can they do different things? Can they be productive, just productive enough to mask the area of weakness, which is not having a dominant pass rusher? I think those two guys are incredibly important because you went and got one of them. You traded Tavondre Sweat for him. He's in a contract year, first-round draft pick. And you went and you traded up to draft the other one in the first round just this year. So there's a lot on these guys, Winston, Flott, Falk, and Johnson. I think those 4 on defense are all really, really important.
But you're heavy DL. You got 3 defensive linemen in your top 10. You got at least 2 defensive backs. Yeah. Obviously Ward.
I would move. So here's what, I would not have John Franklin Myers in the top 10 not because he's not one of the best players. I think he is. I think we know what he is, much like Pollard. I would not have Wan'Dale Robinson in my top 10 because I think while he might be the most important receiver, we kind of know what he is. He's less of an X factor, as Andrew is describing Falk. I think Falk is an X factor. I think that's sort of where I'm going with this. And I would have, I just think that it's premium positions, not as much depth, not as many answers, but higher expectations, right? You were drafted high. We traded for you. We paid good money for you. You're a number 1 corner, number 1 defensive end. So that's kind of where I would go. I would have Peter Skoronski in the top 5 because I think he's their best offensive lineman. And that's sort of a different criteria, right? He has to be good. But I understand putting Skoronski not even in the top 10 because you just kind of know what he is and you trust him.
Yeah, I've got him around 10. I've got Robinson higher because I think he's such a high volume guy. And I think he's going to be a high volume guy. And I think that has to work for them to work. And so I think that's pretty instrumental and important.
Well, let's talk Calvin Ridley here because you are much lower on his importance. I am much higher on his importance. I might have him at number 10 on my list. Tate, I think, is the most important because they are invested in him long-term.
Agreed.
He's a longer-term answer. I think he's number 1. We both agree with that. I think Ridley will define the quality of this receiving core more than any other player. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but if he is even just 80% of himself, 75% of himself, and he plays 13 games, he is a guy that makes the receiving core good if he's the third receiver or the second receiver. Whereas if he's just not available, he's not healthy, he can't get on the field, whatever reason, I think the receiving core is solid, but not an asset. I think with a healthy and successful and productive Ridley, I think he could really take this receiving core to a different tier that Titans fans, frankly, are not used to seeing.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument for him. I think, though, he's the third receiver in terms of priority. And yeah, they're going to be three wide, but they'll go more too tight than they have. They'll throw more to backs than they have, I think.
Yeah.
And I think DK could put some pressure on him. We'll get some snaps. He came alive late in the spring to me. And so I think there's potential for him to drift. I think he's aging and he's coming off injury. I think he may slow down. I think Helm's coming on. I think there are more places to throw. And so I this is his last year, almost certainly. And so they're not going to be compelled to find ways necessarily building him as long-term. So I think you're thinking more present and I'm thinking more big picture, maybe.
That's fair.
But you say maybe 10. I have him, I think 16. So we're not that far off.
Helm is an interesting one to mix in here because like I don't want to say he feels like house money, but if he's really, really good, I don't think anyone's expecting that. And so I think it's kind of house money in that sense, but I think he has to be a certain level. He needs to be like a 1.0 WAR tight end, right? Like he just needs to be your average NFL tight end. Anything above that is a positive development. Retro says more TDs, Ridley or Helm. And I really don't know. That's a really good question.
I feel like Helm will be a bit of a red zone guy, but I also think we're talking like 4 versus 3.
Yeah. I was going to say 3.5 for both. And I might take the over for both, actually. I might take the over for both.
I would say right now, Helm 4, Ridley 3.
Okay. Femi Oladejo is, I don't think, on your list at all.
No.
When I did this, I didn't have him on here, and then I realized, oh, God, I need to have him on here somewhere. I don't think he's top 20. And we can get to the linebackers here as well, because I think this is the range in the top 20, 15 where you start to get to how good is Anthony Hill? Is Cody Barton delivering anything? And how good
I originally did 25, and I didn't even have Barton on it.
Well, it's not the most important position, man. It might be the least important position on the defense, unfortunately.
I'm increasingly thinking of Femi as less of a factor. He's not drafted for their thing. They want long and big, and he's just not it. Not it for them. So, maybe they get something out of him and he helps in the run support thing. But like a year from now, is he a factor at end for a team that needs help at end and doesn't have the speedy end? And that's going to be their primary focus. If they go out and draft a first round end next year, if Jermaine Johnson has a big season and they re-sign him, who are their ends next year? Falk and the speed rusher, and maybe Jermaine Johnson, and maybe Jacob Martin. And where's the room for Femi there? I don't know. And if Jermaine Johnson gets away, you can find a big run stuffing end.
Yeah.
Is that going to be Femi? I don't think so.
Is it similar to Helm is obviously a starting number 1 tight end on the team. That's not the expectation for Femi, but it does feel house money-ish as well. Like anything they get out of him more than like 3 sacks and 30% of the snaps each game is kind of house money. But I do think that they are expecting him to be one of the first guys off the bench. And if that is a dependable role for him, we talked about this during one of the episodes, I think. Like, I don't think expecting him to be Harold Landry this year is fair. I think expecting him to be Harold Landry next year is fair. This year, you want him to prove to everybody that he belongs as the first guy off the bench.
I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on that, but he's got an open door. But I feel a lot better about Jacob Martin than I feel about him. And Jacob Martin's nothing special. Maybe Jacob Martin can be like Sebastian Joseph Day in terms of being like a quality veteran ad who's good at what he does. But if you're asking Femi Oladejo to ultimately, at the end of the season, score better than a quality defensive end who's good at what he does, well, that's not much of a second round pick.
Well, but you can't be pot committed on him because it's a different coaching staff. To your point, I think you have to just say we know the opportunity for him to be this role or this role. Here are the 3 things we want him to do. Let's see if he can do it, and if he does it, great. If not, the only guy who pays the price for that is Borgonzi, and right now he's not.
Like a little bit like Sweat wasn't a fit, and that was Carthon
right.
2 removed, and now you drafted him for Denard. And he's not really a fit.
That's
for
right.
Saleh.
That's right. Make sure you go to Sinkers Beverages, everybody. PaulKuharsky.com if you want to read the entire list of Paul's. I'll probably post mine somewhere. So stay tuned. Follow us on the socials, of course. Support all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Thumbs up, notifications turned on, etc., etc. 5 stars on the podcast app of choice, wherever it is you listen to us. We do appreciate it. Quickly here, hashtag worth the cost, PK. Very clear that there was a concerted NFLPA marketing ploy or effort by a bunch of these players that right around the World Cup final last weekend that, you had Caleb Williams of the world and a bunch of other players throwing it out there. Now, let me lay out the stats here and the facts, and then you and I can discuss what the Titans should do. Of the 11 stadiums that were used in the World Cup, 7 of them were converted to real grass. They use this new technology, which is like indoor infrared light or whatever kind of light it is with watering to kind of grow real grass in all of these stadiums, Atlanta, LA, New York, and all the other ones. I think Kansas City as well, or they might be natural grass anyway. What I read, according to a couple of that's right, Dallas, Houston. There are 15 total stadiums in the NFL that use artificial turf, field turf, whatever you want to call it. The Titans are obviously.
It's that low.
I know I was too, actually. The Titans are one of them. According to a bunch of websites, installing grass is about $500,000 or less, which the install is much cheaper than installing the turf. But if you've already eaten that cost, you're going to let it ride for a while, of course. About $30,000 to maintain the grass is what it says. There are major concerns about how you run concerts, and that's obviously a much bigger concern for the Titans than it would be for Buffalo or whatever. Outdoor concerts are not happening most of the year in Buffalo. That is a concern as it pertains to maintaining the grass surface with a bunch of, drunk idiots in cowboy boots walking around on, the whatever those big thick pieces of metal or plastic they put down on top of the grass is. According to the NFLPA, and this is the number that really struck me, and consider the source here because it is the PA. But they state that they have a 28% higher risk of non-contact injuries on turf than on grass. That is a large number if true. Of that 28%, 32% are knee injuries and 68% are foot and ankle injuries. They're talking about lower body injuries. That doesn't include falling on your shoulders or anything like that. But a 30% higher risk of injury. And if anyone has ever spent any time playing sports on turf, whether it was, in my life, the first turf I played on was Austin, Texas in middle school, because back then they had that like Astrodome turf everywhere in high schools in Texas, and the middle schools would get to go play on the turf. And it was so cool and fun until we all did it one time. And we were like, this is awful. Like, it's terrible. It's way better today, but it still does not have any give. It does not move at all with the player. And I do think you feel differently standing on turf than when you stand on grass as a player or a person or an athlete. They polled 1,700 players. 1,700 players in the NFLPA. Of that 1,700, 92% want to play on grass over turf.
And of that 8%, they don't have a breakdown of this. Kickers are a big part of that 8%.
They probably love the predictability of the turf. That's probably true. So here's Andrew saying, grass is better. We all know it. It looks better, creates more jobs, not ideal for water use, but these owners need to pony up.
You got to water some of that turf.
That's true. NFL was able to cut down on off-field issues by 97% by requiring all players to take free Ubers. I don't understand the relevance, but funny point. Look, here's the deal. The Titans are one of the few new stadiums that actually have natural light. A large, massive, enormous hole in the roof, not an actual hole, but for light to pass through. And it will allow for some of the sunlight, which means I imagine that would reduce some of the cost because you got to bring in all this infrared stuff to really cook the grass. Watering is watering. It is what it is. I know it's an additional cost, but if I was a football general manager or president, if I knew my players had a 30% less chance of getting hurt, that is a competitive advantage, is it not?
It's just not in play. Now, that actually have, and I don't know that they studied this. I mean, growing grass in Nashville, Tennessee during the course of football season is a difficult thing. They struggled with it. There's a strip across the country, Carolina is included in it, where it's hard to sustain the grass through the seasons. You need to kind of change the kind of grass you have halfway through the season, which isn't something that they could do. The way it's rooted and all of that. And look, they had non-contact ACL injuries on their grass. I mean, they had a lot of evidence that their grass was shit. Doesn't mean that
you can't get better grass
is better, right? But they concluded that, 3 years, 4 years before the new stadium was going to be turf anyway. If you're going to have grass in a new indoor stadium, you have to build the stadium for it. I think a tray system that it goes under
rolls
and something
out.
else comes over or whatever, which is an expense. I think an expense that you should look into taking, but I think that ship has sailed. They didn't do that. And I think the hope for indoor grass. Now, World Cup comes back in the lifetime of this stadium, which it will. Mm-hmm. They'd be perfectly happy to put grass in there. I was told, I wrote a story about it early in the stadium process. They're capable of putting grass down in there for international soccer. And I'm sure they would do it to get World Cup games in there in 2034 or whatever the next Open World Cup is.
2038. They'll be in. I think it'll be back in the United States in 38. I think
so. They can do it. They will do it. I think it would be, but FIFA doesn't necessarily make the best choices, but it certainly would be one of the best American cities to have it in if they were looking for the right things, which they aren't necessarily looking for. And the players are smart to pile on that, but the story here is how much more powerful international soccer players are than NFL football players. And international soccer players simply never allowed for the change to happen. And NFL football players did. And
famously, by the way, having been to London a few times in the last couple of years, really easy to grow good grass with all the moisture.
They built a stadium in London that has grass for soccer that they changed to turf for football, for NFL football. That's how much the league cares.
Because they don't want the NFL ruining the grass.
For soccer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Got to be
they're so far lost on this. They can do all the talking they want. We know what they'll win in further CBA negotiations and the things that they could win, even softer off seasons, maybe, quicker free agency, maybe some advantages on the tag, things that are more money related than they are actual player in season related.
I do think Darren Lee, not the former linebacker for the Jets, having players enthused to play on grass is a competitive advantage. I don't think it's about the attitude. I think it's about, if you told me that I was going to have 30% less of a particular injury, it's a no-brainer to me to fix that problem. Now, is it that simple? Fine. But the problem is, and I think this is why it was a really smart ad campaign, because not only was it tied to FIFA, you know what else it was tied to? Record-setting $451 million per team distributed in revenue sharing. The salary cap, PK, is what? $300 million? Like
north of that.
That is baked in hundreds of millions in revenue per team. In just revenue sharing before you get to local revenue, which is also in the hundreds of millions. And if you are telling me it is $100,000, let's ballpark it and overestimate. It's $100,000 to manage grass. I'm sorry, but that is like one scout team player for like a month. You should, if you could reduce the injuries for your team and have a healthier roster, that is a competitive advantage that does not go into the cap. And it is very clear that there's enough money to do this. And I agree with you. The players didn't prioritize it in their negotiations, and that is why this is where we are. I'm with you on that. I know these stats are from the PA, so you do have to maybe take that for what it's worth. But if this is all reality here, I find it hard to believe why any team wouldn't be actively trying to convert back to grass as quickly as possible.
I think that number's low. That may be maintaining it for football, but it's not including the
dollar means too low.
And all of that dollar low.
Okay.
And I have to believe, and I haven't read into this, but I remember back at the World Cup in '94, they put grass in the Silver Dome. And there was kind of a hot. Now that's primitive technology. It was kind of a hothouse effect, and these stadiums are different, but I think you'd have to build them accounting for carbon
footprint, or whatever,
footprint that's coming off in an indoor venue,
ventilation,
in a different way, and all of that. Yeah. And I just don't think we're building these buildings accounting for that, or accounting for that long term. If you've got it for a month, that's one thing. If you've got it permanently, that's a different thing. And you want to go into the new Nissan Stadium at 72 degrees with regular humidity, and I don't know that that's.
I think your argument around the unique ecosystem of Nashville, I think, is LA could do this. LA could put grass. It's open air. It's ventilated. It's clear. You could do it. It's not that it's open air for a reason, because the weather in LA is the best. I get it, and I agree with the reasoning behind having the indoor stadium, because having been to the Rolling Stone show, which might actually be behind you, that was one of the hottest, most miserable nights I've ever spent at Nissan Stadium, and that was like 12 years ago, and I still remember how awful it was going to Nissan Stadium in the first month and a half of the season. At the first 2 months of the season, summer concert series, it's miserable. So having the climate control element is obviously incredibly important. So what would I trade personally? I want the climate control. If you could do both, that's where you've got a legitimate competitive advantage, it feels like. So,
yeah. And look, the sport is built, the construct of the sport with guys having short careers lends itself to ownership power.
Yeah.
Players haven't found a solution to that.
No.
And, until they do, owners are going to win on these issues on a pretty regular basis.
Yep. All right. I saw some of those numbers. I saw the campaign. I saw the players. I know it happened a couple of weeks ago, but I thought it was really interesting. And I think it makes sense to consider these things while the Titans are deciding to build a new stadium. Because I agree, having an Arizona-like product where you can just roll the grass outside, treat it with natural things, and then roll it in when you need it, that'd be perfect. But that's also in the middle of the desert where there's literally you're not in the middle of a city. Right?
Space. Yeah. I mean, it's not gave back all the space that's an inch away from the building. So you can't roll out a field into this space that they've given back. That's the ideal scenario.
That's right. I do think if it can drop down and then something, it place.
Burnabout has some crazy system that's billions of dollars.
All right. Make sure you check out paulkuharsky.com. Please go to Sinkers Beverages. There's tickets available linked in the show notes right now. Please support us on YouTube and social media apps and podcasts everywhere. So please listen to all the shows. Oh yeah, there you go. Look at that shirt.
Barbecue sponsors paulkuharsky.com. Maybe they'll show up here. Who knows?
I like that shirt though. That's a nice shirt you got.
Great shirt.
I like that.
Very soft.
Is that like it hangs well,
Hangs very well.
Got to have a good shirt that hangs well. All right. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We do appreciate you. Titans practice is here, boys and ladies, however many of you there are. And we'll be talking actual football here pretty soon on the next episode. So thanks a lot. Do appreciate it. For Paul, I'm Braden. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you next time.
Cheers.